Did you enjoy the films?
Yes. Got to say that again.
Hello, my name is Anya, and I have the pleasure to be here today with you and with these two legends. First, wonderful singer of Suede, Fred Anderson. Hello. And here, fantastic man. You made me dance so many times. Bernard Sumner. And this is Mike Christie. He is the director of both films. Give him a round of applause. Tonight is very special because it's the first time that Fred and Bernard and Mike is doing a joint Q&A. So I thought we should talk a little bit about what links these bands together.
Do you want to use this microphone? That will make you lots of noise.
Maybe. And obviously the thing that links them together tonight is you, Mike.
Yeah.
So let's start off with you. You told me that when you made these films that you kept on thinking, oh, there's some links here. Sorry, just a second.
This thing is on, I think. It doesn't work. Never work.
Never work.
I'll start you off. Tell me, what was it that you saw that sort of linked these bands together in making the film?
Well, this is very strange, by the way. This is like kind of that moment where your life just collides in a really weird kind of way, being like, anyway. It was very odd that I ended up making these two films at the same time, and it was obviously very kind of opportunistic in a way that the timings of everything moved around. And basically, there were two things, I think. Well, the first one was, I'm not entirely sure that many bands have to survive and face the kind of amount of sort of drama and grief and events that Suede and New Order.
Adversity.
Yeah.
Adversity.
Yeah. And secondly, there's a lot of talk about kind of heritage bands, and this is something that's become a bugbear of mine, that anybody who basically made records in the 20th century has become a heritage band. And at the end of the day, I was really fascinated by the fact that not only have these guys sort of all survived a hell of a lot of events, but they were actually really making some of the most amazing music that they've made in their career. I mean, both The Blue Hour and Music Complete were, in my mind, two of the best albums that Suede and New Order had made. And so strangely, I was making these films slightly at the same time. I'd shot the New Order film. I was editing the New Order film, about to start making the Suede film. And then people started saying the same things in interviews. At one point, Bernard said to me, "Is it normal," in the interview, I think you heard it in the film, "is it normal, for bands to survive or to have all this shit," or whatever it was that you said?
Yeah.
And Brett said the same thing in a piece of archive. And
I did.
Suddenly there are all these kind of universal themes.
Well, when I speed watched both documentaries
To refresh your memory.
the day before yesterday, for the first time, I watched the New Order one first decade, obviously New Order. And I heard of me making a comment: is it normal for bands to go through this amount of shit? And does it happen to anyone else? And then I went on to watch the Suede documentary. It's tough.
The answer is
it's tough. Not anyone can do it.
Well, that's the thing. If everyone could do it, then they would.
Yeah.
It's hard work. Yeah, but it's something to do, isn't it? Keeps you.
It's something to do. Yeah. If you can't get a normal job.
Yeah. For a while.
It's
don't really do anything else. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same for most bands that initially things go swimmingly well. You've got the energy of youth on the side, and you've got songs that seem to fall into your lap, and then it gets more difficult and more difficult, and you climb that mountain, and then you hit a great deal of success, and you think, this is it, this is great, and it is. but there's only one place left to go once you get to the top of Everest, which is back down again. And that's what seems to happen to every band, that you, for all the success that you've earned, you have to deal with the adversity that inevitably follows. And it was comforting to see that.
Thank you. But it's like relationship, isn't it? Being in a band is like it's like an extended relationship, and romantic relationships are really hard, you know. And so why shouldn't sort of band relationships be really hard as well? It's like there's a paradox with them. There's kind of like a need for security and a need for excitement. These kind of like mutually exclusive things. And they're hard, and you fall apart, and it's how you overcome the adversity that sort of sometimes defines you, I think. So.
I think in most bands there's 3 or 4 reasonable people, and then one pain in the arse. Which comes down to you? Me? That makes life miserable for the others, and I think it's like throwing a dice, you know. It's just what God throws at you, or what life throws at you, if you like. It's not just dealing with events with New Order and Joy Division. Obviously, we had Joy Division had the catastrophic event about singer Ian Curtis taking his own life, and after that, my producer died, and then Rob Graham, manager, and then Tony Wilson, boss of our record label. And it seemed that we'd been cursed at one point, you know. But I guess if you take any group of people, like any 4 or 5, 6 people in a room, they will go through similar events in their lives with you know, that journey through life. So I don't think we were especially cursed. I think it's just that's what happens.
It didn't happen to one direction
as well.
Yeah,
you're living your life in public, and everyone goes through horrific events. That's part of life, but it's a very public sort of way you go through it.
Yeah, it is. It's going on in public, and in my case, learning singing in public, which isn't very nice.
You compare this with a friendship or relationship, but not many of us get a film about that we can see. What do you like watching documentaries about yourself?
Well, I never even read interviews that I ever do. I don't like to analyse myself. I think the way to be good at what you do is to forget yourself. So I spend all my effort forgetting myself, and then people like mine maybe watch detailed, studies of the band. So I don't enjoy watching it now. Just rather.
Did you ever though? In the early days? Did you sort of like read press and stuff like that? Because I can imagine, in a way, now New Order are so beyond kind of the point where anyone questions whether they're any good or not. It's just accepted that New Order are one of the greats.
Well,
whereas in the early days, there's a sense of insecurity, isn't there? Do you know what I mean? Where you don't quite know what people think of you and stuff like that.
Yeah, I do. It's a really good point, bro. In Joy Division, initially people absolutely hated us, and then after No Pleasures came out, we were everyone liked us. Everyone, like press darlings. And then after Ian died, we started with New Order. Everybody hated us again and said that there's no chance that we would make it.
And did you read your brass then?
Yeah, but that is probably around about the time I started reading.
Okay.
Because if you'd have taken that stuff seriously, I would have given up.
Yeah.
I would have given up before Joy Division, actually. But, so
it's hard, isn't it?
The press out the knives sharp.
It's getting easier.
The press out the knives sharp for us, but when we released Blue Monday, they put the knives back in the scales, so we kind of won.
Okay. That's pretty good.
Okay, speaking about being the center of attention, I have a few questions for the two of you, and you just point your answer. Okay? So, who of you did most drugs?
This morning.
Sure.
Well, I'm a bit older than Brett, so I guess it's
Yeah.
Okay. Who did most birds?
Most what?
Girls?
It's a bit of a personal question.
We don't like the tone of this.
In this decade,
It's into a
politically correct. We don't
No, exactly. This is post Me Too. You know, we're 21st century reconstructed man.
It wasn't me, that's for sure.
I'm pointing the microphone to
No, that's
It certainly wasn't him. You know.
But it's leading me to the thing that, like, who did most front page covers?
Oh God.
Probably Brett.
Brad. Okay, and
Yeah.
who enjoyed the spotlight the most?
Got my top
Probably
on.
Brett.
For a very brief window, you know, between 1992 and 1993. And then it just got really boring.
But Brad, tell me what fascinates you about a frontman like Bernard, who is a more reluctant type of frontman than you are?
I do think it's really interesting the way Bernard sort of conducts his career, because it's a very different sort of dynamic to the way I do, I suppose. You know, he doesn't seem to. I always think it fascinates me the difference between person and persona in pop music. And when I get up on stage, it's sort of I'm definitely inhabiting a persona, you know. And I think everyone does to a certain extent. It's impossible not to, but you are less. You get up and you sort of play, and there's a sort of, it's a different kind of thing.
Yeah, I think if you don't lose yourself in the music, then you can't put a good performance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think initially I was reluctant, obviously because I didn't want to be a singer. I became an accidental singer. But I enjoy it now. I really enjoy it. Yeah, it's good fun, and I'd say I inhabit the music. The music inhabits me. I really enjoy it now. It's great. I consider it a blessing that I became a singer.
And what fascinates you about the Brett way of being a frontman, Bernard?
About what?
The Brett way, taking the Brett Anderson way of being a frontman.
Oh, right, okay. Well, everyone's got their own way through life, and everyone's got their own approach. And originally, in Joy Division, I was a guitarist and keyboard player, and I had no desire to be a singer, no desire. But I presume Brett wanted to be a singer. I wanted to be a guitarist.
Actually, I'd started off in the band as a guitar player, and I got pushed to the front as well. I did. It's true. I was in a band called Jeff, and we lost the singer, and I got pushed to the front.
Oh, right.
And I could vaguely sing in tune, and then I became a terrible show-off.
Which is a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah. That's the only way to do it.
Someone's got to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How did you see the difference the most? Like,
Between these guys?
Yeah.
Oh God, that's hard.
Yeah.
How do you see the difference?
Careful what you say.
Well, it's very strange because, I mean, obviously I've got a very historical relationship with Suede. You know, we first met 26 years ago, and at the same time I'm from Manchester. So, and grew up in the 80s in Manchester, so New Order were part of kind of, my DNA. So, and I understood where the overlap was, and the overlap isn't just Peter Saville, who obviously has a fantastic starring role in both films. A lot more than New Order film, but there's a whole extra on the DVD of Peter and Brett. It's a really difficult question.
I think it's lost in words.
that's good.
Which is unusual, apparently.
What's the difference between us
Oh, I see.
to him?
The difference between you two.
It's,
I think the difference in experience. Okay.
I think it's tactfully avoiding the answer on that one.
Okay, let's try a new
No, I missed the question. Sorry. I missed that one.
Okay.
Brett, in the film you speak about that you put on sort of a rock star persona at the time Bernard Butler leaves. When did you experience that rock star persona coming in you? And
well, I think it takes over you very, very kind of like stealthily. and slowly, and you don't really notice the point at which you're kind of not really you anymore. It sounds like such a cliche sort of thing, but it does. That after a while, you start kind of developing a persona, and it's interesting because it's partly you, but it's partly a kind of like a cartoon of you, partly an exaggerated version of you that's made up of how other people perceive you. It's a really interesting thing. But I can't say at what point I actually really noticed it happening. I can just look at it retrospectively and look back on the 90s and look back on the heyday of the band and notice, yeah, I can see that I was definitely inhabiting a persona. But I think it's impossible not to.
And
I think everyone does to a certain extent. Even when you walk down the street and you go to a restaurant and you say hello to someone, there's an element of persona to everyday life. You know, the whole world's a stage and we are merely players kind of thing, the Shakespearean idea. It's very true. There's a real truth in that. And it's just exaggerated and magnified when you jump up on stage to varying degrees, you know. But there's no such thing as non-persona, I don't think. I think it's just part of life.
And who is here now today?
Sorry?
And who is here now today? Is that the rockstar persona?
I don't know. It's sort of like an element of yeah, of course. It's sort of I'm projecting a persona to a certain extent sitting up here because this isn't a kind of you have to kind of mentally deal with the sort of intimidation of being faced by 600 people. It's part of the kind of armour that you need to build for yourself in order to do these things. It's a kind of like it's a self-preservation thing. That's how personas come about, because it's almost like the consequences of things happening to the persona are less harmful than happening to the person. So it's to a certain extent you're always projecting a persona. Yeah.
Do you recognise that, Bernard?
I don't know, I just walk on stage and don't really think about what I do, just that I want to enjoy the music that we're playing as much as the people in the audience are enjoying it. I think if I enjoy it, they'll enjoy it, and the trick is to lose yourself in the music and forget yourself. So I guess I do it in maybe more subconscious way. The trick is not to care too much, but to care just enough.
Yeah, I agree with that. Not to care too much is quite. It's to lose. You know, the quote from Performance, that film by Nick Rowe. The only performance that really makes it all the way is the one that achieves madness, and that's exactly it. You have to lose yourself in the moment. Really. You've got to kind of almost be there and not be there at the same time.
Mike, both these films, it's got happy endings. It's got happy endings. Is it you being a romantic, or why did it end that way?
I think because the end of both films is actually about the future. I think it's quite a simple thing, and certainly the end of the Suede film is about an incredible kind of the fact that this is a band who are kind of really functioning and focusing very much on the now and the future. And the New Order film, you have to remember, isn't a biography. You know, it's about this project, and I found it really uplifting. And you know, the reason why I actually, because it wasn't called Decades until the very last minute, and I didn't really know what the end of the film was till the very last minute. But it's actually about the we call them the kids, which is terribly, we're not meant to say that, are we? But the orchestra, you know. I find it really amazing that you have this kind of really young generation of music students, kind of, you know, just there and representing this, you know, this whole other future. And you know, normally people go to kind of music schools to kind of learn classical music and, you know, music standards and styles, and these guys were, you know, 12, 13 keyboard players playing kind of, you know, New Order parts.
Well,
like classical music.
When we were sitting at the back, out in the green room, or whatever it was. My favourite bit in Decades is the bit where the 20-year-old music students are playing Decades on the ukulele. Yeah. And that's a lovely little moment.
Yeah, we took the bit of Bernard out, didn't we?
Yeah, the bit where hello?
Your mic's gone off.
We took a little bit out where I told them to shut the fuck up. It's just trying to relax and interesting. They understood.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I didn't know they were having such fun, you know.
It was a lovely moment. But before we came here, I was sort of thinking about what I was anticipating the question. What is the kind of connection between Suede and Suede, because we're both up here. I think both bands. The one thing that we have in common is that we're both not particularly nostalgic.
No, definitely not.
Which is strange because you just watched a kind of biography of Suede, and it goes back to our but it's always about the next thing for me. Yeah. It's always about the next project. It's never about kind of going back. Really.
Yeah,
and I think it's the same with you guys as well.
I think the essence of creativity is to create something now that will exist in the future. So that's the essence of creativity. So what's the point of looking back? I know these documentaries do look back, but that's okay as long as you're looking forward as well.
Yes, absolutely.
As long as you know.
I think you can learn quite a lot by looking back as well. I'd never completely ignore my past. I think sometimes looking back at what you've done.
Mistakes,
or even the things you've done well. To kind of there's a point in Suede's history in the end of the 90s when we were making the fourth album, when we were kind of completely ignoring everything that we'd done in the past, and that meant ignoring lots of good stuff. And I think it's important to kind of recognise what you do well, and that's what we did kind of when we came back and we reformed, and we kind of looked at what we did well and tried to do that again.
You're dead right, because we did that with our last album, Music Complete. The previous album is kind of the reverse of what you've done. Previous albums, have been guitar albums, and then we came back with Music Complete and did a synthesizer album, which was really well received and sold well. But I needed to take a holiday from synthesizers and electronic music, just a break, because you reach a point where you start repeating yourself. So you need a break, you need to get away
You need to do different things just to come back from that, and you can't sometimes come back to the same thing, but if you come back to it fresh, it's okay, isn't it? You just can't keep doing exactly the same thing over and over.
No, you need to get
sometimes
away.
it's quite good to fuck up in a way, because it gives you, lets you deviate from the path and come back to stuff.
Yeah. Trouble is, like you say, you've got to fuck up in public.
I think maybe we have 10 more minutes or something. If somebody here among you have got a question, I think it's time. Can you maybe just speak up and I'll try and...
Probably only one question.
Yeah.
Excellent. I didn't realise Danish people were so shy.
Congratulations on the films, Mike.
Thank you.
My question is for Bernard and Brett. I can imagine both of you have been approached many times in the past about people who want to make films about you and about your band. So what was it about Mike that made you want to go with him and have him make the films about you?
And I'll just repeat so everybody can hear. You have been approached many times probably about doing a film. What was it about Mike that made you say?
Well, I've known Mike for such a long time. I've known him since the early 90s or mid 90s, whatever, and he's become a friend, and that might be, some people might think, well, that's a bad thing because it means that he's going to be too sort of like, I don't know, you could end up having a powder puff documentary where you're just sort of like airbrushing over your career. But I think I saw it as an opportunity to be really, really honest about my career and where I'd made mistakes in a way that I couldn't possibly be if it was someone that I didn't know very well and didn't trust. Because there's always a slight fear that if you don't know someone that well, they've got always going to have a different agenda. Whatever you do, if you're working in a collaboration with someone, they're always going to have a slightly different agenda to you. And with a filmmaker that you don't know, that I wouldn't know so well, they could possibly, exploit that vulnerability and kind of use it in a, I don't know, a frivolous way or something like that. And I trusted mine not to do that, so I could be very, very honest. So that was one of the most important things for me about entering into that.
Yeah, and you're not going to get stitched up either.
Exactly.
I think trust is a key word.
Yeah.
And I think New Order trusted Mike because he's a very decent chap.
Oh.
Most of the time. Well, we've had 2 films made about us. We've had 24-Hour Party People, which was about factory records and the early days of Joy Division, Factory, New Order, Happy New Days, etc., etc. Tony Wilson bossed that record label, and that was kind of a funny look, a humorous look at cock-ups were made. And then there was Anton Corbijn's film Control, which was really about Ian Curtis and what happened to him. And I like both films very much. Control was very serious, but it approached a serious subject and it was very accurate. But this documentary with Mike was about something, not about the past, it was about something current that we were doing currently, and that was about quite a unique thing that we did. I don't think anyone's ever used a synthesizer orchestra before, so it was quite a unique concept, and we couldn't put this show on everywhere for years on end, so it was important it was captured. So that was the reason, really.
Can I add something? Is that okay? Yeah. It's just worth saying that we had a sort of 3-hour lunch at the beginning of the process, didn't we?
We
Do you
did,
remember?
yeah.
And the whole of New Order were going, we're not making biography, we're not making biography, we're not making... And it was... So there was moments where there had to be a bit of biographical context. And there was, by that point, there was trust. And
yeah.
So we were able to kind of dip into kind of those moments, but without kind of it becoming the same old sort of versions of the story, which are a little bit sort of exploitative, which is exactly what you're saying, sort of sensitively handled without kind of being sort of exploitative.
Another question?
That's it. No one's got one.
I'm wondering about there was a point in the early 90s when, say 93, when you released Republic and you released your first album approximately at the same time. Were you aware of each other? Were you aware of the...
Well, I was certainly aware of New Order. They were the first gig I ever went to in the early 80s in Brighton, so yeah.
And you guys, did you listen to the Britpop bands? to sort of emphasize the connection between you?
I think we first bumped into each other at the Mercury Music Prize in 1993.
Did we?
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember Simon, our drummer, saying that he kind of the lift had opened and he'd said, and you'd been standing there, and he'd said, "Oh, hello" to you, thinking because he recognised you. Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing of like when you see someone from a soap opera or something like that, you go, "Oh, right, don't know them."
I first heard of Suede because when their first album was released, I did an interview with a journalist. It was really horrible. He said, "You know, your album's shit." He said, "Have you heard the Suede album? It's brilliant."
That's a reason to hate me, isn't it?
But maybe not all of you know, but Brett, you moved actually to Manchester to study and go to university.
I did.
Before all this happened in the film, what was the reason that you actually went to Manchester? What drew you there?
Well, exactly. That's a good point. One of the reasons that I went to Manchester was the music. You know, one of the reasons I went to Manchester was the music, and you know bands like Fall, the Smiths, and Joy Division, and New Order. You know, it's one of the reasons that I kind of gravitated. That I think lots of people did in the mid and late 80s, because the music was just so exciting. And it's, you know, as a kid growing up in a commuter town, you look at the map of England and you think, oh, well, Manchester looks quite cool. It's good to
You didn't stay though.
I didn't stay. No. I ended up. I kind of left. I didn't like the university. I loved Manchester, but I didn't really. I kind of got bored, and I stayed in this awful place at Owens Park. Do you know Owens Park?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
But I ended up staying and working in a club called the Cypress Tavern on Princess Street. I think so.
Yeah.
Would Suede have made it in Manchester, Bernard?
Would they have made it in Manchester? Well, they didn't need to. I don't think Joy Division made it in Manchester. We made it by travelling around, really. And, I think people in Manchester love Suede. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but I don't know. It's hard for me to talk about Manchester because I grew up there. I was born there. I was actually born in Manchester. Lived in a place called Salford, which is like a twin city, latched onto Manchester. So I can't see it as other people see it. A lot of people I know, and some people that work for New Order move to Manchester because of the music,
and your bassist as well.
and they're going, it's great, we love it, and I'm like, oh, really? Because I've got my memories of growing up there, and it was pretty rough where I grew up. So it's different when you go to a place and visit it and see it from the outside and see it from the inside. It's a different thing. You know, I'll never be able to get their perspective on the city.
Does anybody else have a question? Yeah.
So I found both films or movies very moving, and for instance with the Suede movie, you see sort of that development from very sort of young age and then until sort of adulthood, and that just made me wonder. A lot of music is in a way sort of confined in time and space. You write about a person and that person is there. So I'm wondering about some, especially your characters in a way, Brett. What happened to them afterwards? I mean, do you ever think about them? Like Tony, who reads Ancient Days, where's he now? Or Sadie, or the girl from Another No One? I mean, are they still there, or?
No, that's a very good question.
Can you sum up the question you've read before?
Sorry, can I sum it up?
Yeah, just.
For the others.
It's a very interesting question. This chap here, there's kind of characters in some of my songs. There's someone called Terry, and there's someone called Sadie, and there's someone called Tony. And they kind of like, and his question is, do they just exist in one time, or do I ever think about them, how their lives have developed beyond that kind of thing? And that's a really interesting question. Probably the short answer is no. I'm not a very caring dad, obviously. I'll let them get on with it, they'll be alright, you know. So, I don't, it's a very good question, I like it, yeah. I was talking with Mike about the kind of, about writing the new Suede album, and we were talking about this idea, driving in the car the other day, and this idea, the characters in who are in fly tipping, who throw all their worldly goods away and stuff like that, and talking about the next chapter being about what happens to those two people after that, after they've made that kind of huge pivotal life choice. So it's a good question. I'm thinking of developing characters as I go along. So interesting.
A last question, right here in the back.
First of all, thanks for two great movies. You both talk in those movies, you talk about your background, where you're from, and you just mentioned that again about Manchester. And I was just wondering, would it have made any difference if you had grown up in a different environment, in a different city? Did your background, where you came from, is that also part of who you became as musicians?
Yeah.
Well, I think it definitely did enjoy it, because it grew up in quite a brutal landscape. It was all industrial decay. It was all the cliches, you know. It was like factories that were falling down, smashed windows. We rehearsed in one of them, and the whole city was decayed, and dying at that time. But we didn't really know. But that was odd. We just thought that's the way it is, you know. But it does affect your music on a subconscious level. I think in a way, you know, the LA affected the Beach Boys. You know, you get the surfing, sun music, Dusseldorf affected the music of Kraftwerk, and Manchester affected that urban decay, affected the music of Joy Division, and so on with other bands. Certainly, that's my perspective on it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think a band's environment is a really key influence. I think it's often underplayed in lots of ways, because the press always talk about what decade the band had been influenced, what sort of genre, and these sorts of things. And the actual physical environment that the band grows up in is a huge factor. It certainly was with my band. That's the only kind of reference point that I've really got. But you know, the documenting this sort of scruffy kind of council house sort of world that I grew up in was really very much part of the message that that we were singing about in those days. So yes, I don't think you can avoid it. Really.
I think the joy of it was more the sound of the band, because Ian's lyrics were intensely personal.
Yeah,
and
it was more of an emotional landscape, wasn't it, rather than a
Yeah.
sort of physical landscape.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely the sound.
It was more the sound of the band, it was this kind of stripped back, barren, austere sound, you know. But apart from the environment, also things that affect you when you're writing is your record collection, music you listen to as a teenager, that affects you, and also probably more than anything, the personal experiences that you go through as you're growing up. You know, stuff happens to you that's quite serious, that dictates your music as well. So it's a combination of all those three factors that shape your music, I think. Really. Well, rather than any desire to be famous, it was it's a difference between wanting to be famous and having to make music. And I think we had to make music.
There was one more question down there. Yeah.
Yeah. This is for Bernard mostly. Talking about lyrics, how do you go about it? It's a bit. You come from a tradition with, as you said, with Ian's quite personal lyrics. What inspires you as a lyricist?
You have to be honest now.
Well, when I first started, I just didn't have a clue. I'm quite a private person. I didn't want to communicate anything with people. I'm really, by nature, I'm more of a watcher rather than doer. So I like to watch other people and observe them rather than interact, really. That's just my nature. So it's very difficult for me to... If you write music, because I write music as well, that's very abstract. You write a set of chords, it's abstract. You write a melody, it's abstract. A drum rhythm is abstract. But once you get to the lyrics, that's a literal thing, that you communicate a literal message from person to person, and I just didn't know how to do it. So I had to do it because the only other option was failure. So I just used to sit there for hours and hours and hours and bottle wine until something came out, and it would be more the way I write, more from the subconscious. So it's like a stream of consciousness. So I'll write something, maybe a line, and then I'll give birth to another line, and then the 2 or 3 lines start to make sense, and then the song kind of writes itself. Because you don't get any education about how to do that, do you?
No, I think about this such a lot. It's kind of obsessed me for 30 years or something like that, about what kind of, what works with, what makes song lyrics good. And I think for me personally, I don't like knowing what my own lyrics are about too much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I quite like that. As soon as I know too much, it's I can't. It's about that. I like there to be an element of mystery, even in my own songs, and I think you do that really well, because it is quite oblique, and you're not quite sure what the song's about. But I think any listener makes up their own narrative, don't they? Do you know what I mean? You kind of you look at a load of dots and you see a picture, sort of thing. It's like that,
and that makes it more interactive as well.
Yeah, exactly.
If the lyrics are a bit oblique, and then someone puts their own interpretation on it, that's great, because then the person listening to the record is part of the creative process. That's better in a way, really.
Yeah. I like that as well. I like it when people kind of give their interpretations of the songs. And I always think it's really valid as well. I think the writer of the song doesn't have complete ownership about what the song means.
Yeah.
I sometimes like it when people say, well, I think this is about this. That's a great,
It was
nice
interesting to do some of the songs in decades, years later, and then come back and listen to the lyrics, and I'd go, that's really shit. So what I do is rewrite the lyric. It doesn't mean that they have to be set in stone for eternity once you've written it. If you can come back years later and go, well, I'm better now, and then change it, and that's really, I must have been tired, very, very tired.
You rewrote some lyrics?
Yeah, just words. Why not?
Okay, we have time for one more question. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question, because you both have amazing long careers, and it's a lot about the past, of course, as well in the documentaries. But how do you feel about connecting with your audience right now in 2019 with the new technology, with internet and everything? Like, how do you feel about that? Because we don't really see that in film.
Okay, the question.
Both of you, actually.
The question is, how do you feel, or how do you connect with your audience in 2019 with all new technologies and
New
Well-
generations of fans and
Well, I think in a way that all that new technology has made music too accessible, and it's devalued the currency of recording. But what it has done is made people want to go out and see bands in real life and see the real thing. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, really. New technology is interesting to me because for making music, all the things that we dreamt of doing in the early 80s with synthesizers and sequencers and computers, you can do it now. You couldn't really do it in the early 80s, so from that aspect, it's good. Yeah.
And Brett, do you think about connecting with your audience in a new way now?
I don't know. I don't think about that much, to be honest. I'm aware that, you know, kind of audiences can be mobilised and people can send information in a completely different way. But I think it's essentially the same. You know, you're still kind of like confronted with your audience at a concert, and you're still sort of, you know, disseminating records to people. Okay, they're not going to HMV and buying them. They're kind of getting them, but it's still the same, essentially the same process. It's just with different clothes.
I think it's changed something fundamentally, which was that when I was a teenager at school, you'd save up to buy an album, and it'd be a very special thing. You go and buy the album, you check the artwork out, and go on vinyl, and then you go back and you play it at home, and you sit in the room on your own and you play it and play it and play it, and you gave it very special attention. But the way that we do things now is, and I was doing it today in my hotel room, is that you play your music streaming system, whichever one it is, and it's just one of 350 tracks. So
I agree. There's too much information. That's the one thing that I find confusing as an old man in the 21st century. There's lots of information, and I did quite like those days when I used to be able to afford kind of like one album a month or something like that. I used to do a paper round. I'd go out on my paper round and scrape money together and like be able to save about £5 a month and buy one album. And I lived in that world for a month. You know, I lived in, you know, Unknown Pleasures or something like that, and I was in that world for a whole month, living this world and knowing every single little bit and looking at the sleeve and stuff like that. And I think that kind of level of obsession is possibly not with us anymore, which is a shame. There's too much, things get washed over you, and there's too many choices.
Yeah.
I just want to add
It's almost made music, and I guess Brian Eno came up with the concept of ambient music, but the new technologies almost made all music ambient music, because background music, yeah.
But the flip side of that, and we're sat here at a documentary festival, is, and I know this as a documentary maker, I've been making documentaries for over 20 years, and I'm suddenly making music documentaries, and I think it's because music has become so fragmented and so sort of bite-sized and so Facebook clipped and Instagram storied that there's an appetite now for proper detail, for insight, you know, for quality. That, you know, I mean, there's so many people who want to make music documentaries now because in a weird way the audience is starved, I think, of insight. Possibly, I don't know. I mean, yeah, we're sat here talking about it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of commercial music here on the radios. It's just basically a cash register, and it's just people just make it to use music as a cash register. There's no soul in it, but not everyone. But I think there's too much music like that now. There always was an element of that, but you know, it's just it's too much of it now. Let's end on a positive. We've got a positive question. It's about Brexit.
Don't hear much about Brexit these days, do you?
It's good to be in your way.
Yeah. I hope you promise to come back with or without Brexit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if they let us into the if they let us into the country.
Thank you very much. No, I'll. Okay.
Oh.
Hi.
Hi.